Welcome to the Silicon Slopes Conversations. Today we're joined by Julie Castle, who's the CEO of Best Friends Animal Society. How are you?
Hey, I'm great. It's great to be. I feel like I'm on the Tonight Show.
Yeah, but we don't get paid very much.
Oh.
I wish
I
that
always
was
wondered
the
what
case.
was in the mugs.
This is V8 Energy Drink.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Okay.
It would be cool if we were sponsored by something, right? But we're not.
Yeah.
I'm so happy you're here because you guys are doing amazing things down there. There's a beautiful story to tell, and most people love animals, and they love being kind, and they love being generous, and this is going to encompass all of that. So let's start with the story of Best Friends Animal Society. It's a pretty old one, and then I'd love for you to weave in when you got involved.
Awesome. So how many have heard of Best Friends? Great. That's so cool. So Best Friends started in 1984. It was started by a group of friends, and they were they call themselves a group of misfits. And as you hear this story, we have one founder that often says it's like the Muppets take Manhattan, because they're this incredibly smart group of people. Many of them were educated at Oxford or Cambridge. A lot of them are Brits. They decided to kind of drop out of society and start this animal sanctuary in the middle of nowhere, southern Utah. What a great business idea. And so they broke ground in 1984. And they just moved from a ranch in Prescott, Arizona. And they sold the ranch for sale by owner. And that's how they were paying for the mortgage on the current property. And it turns out that the buyer defaulted. And so they had two loans that they had to take care of. And, they slowly, for about the past 7 years, built up the infrastructure of the place. And none of them knew how to do plumbing or electrical or anything like that. They read it out of Time Life books and built this place by hand. Just to give you an idea, the total sanctuary is on about 33,000 acres. And the mileage of roads on the sanctuary, I think, is somewhere around, I don't know, I heard 100 miles of roads. It's like its own little city. And so as they were building the infrastructure, the buyers defaulted on this loan, and that's about when I arrived. And literally, we were hand to mouth. And essentially, what they started to do was go to grocery stores all over the Intermountain West and California and sit in front of grocery stores asking for donations. With a little can, a coffee can, a card table with, pictures of the animals and a mailing list. And that is how they pulled themselves out of the hole. And so fast forward a couple of years to me graduating from Southern Utah University. I'd been student body president there. I'd been really preparing to go to law school. That was kind of my dream. Wanted to get into the best law school I could. And I got into the University of Virginia School of Law, which is one of the top law schools in the country. And I thought, look, I've got one summer to goof off before life gets real. So my friends and I jumped in my 1979 Dodge Colt, which every panel was a different color because I'd been in so many accidents. And we drove to Mexico with no air conditioning. And we decided to stay for as long as our money, until we ran out of money. Sure enough, we woke up one morning. We'd driven all the way to Puerto Vallarta from Salt Lake City, so 1,800 miles, and woke up one day and we were like, okay, we've got just enough money for gas and a candy bar each to get home. And so we drove straight through, and we were, tired and hungry and gross. And one of my friends wanted to stop at this animal sanctuary in southern Utah, and I was like, no way, we're not stopping. Let's keep going. We've got our lives to, get on with. And finally, we just gave in and we pulled into this magnificent canyon that in any other state would be a national park. And I was so taken by the canyon, and I got to tour around. They gave me a tour. I was so taken by the founder's story and their ethic and this idea that was so innovative and groundbreaking called no-kill. And I was like, what does no-kill mean? And the answer back to me was simple. It was, in our society, in the wealthiest country in the world, why does our system choose to kill animals rather than to save them? And of course, I'd been in my local animal shelter and knew most of the animals didn't make it out. But here, they'd kind of put their stake in the ground and said, look, we're going to do things differently. And I was like, wow, this place is incredible. These people are incredible. This has potential to change the world. And so we pulled out of the sanctuary, stopped for gas. I went to the payphone and put a couple of quarters in, called my dad and said, I'm not going to law school. I'm moving to Kanab, Utah, and I'm going to work at this animal sanctuary. And he was really happy. He was so upset and, staged this intervention. And, high school friends, college friends, everyone was calling me, taking me to lunch. Are you sure? Julie's going through a midlife crisis. What's happening? And I have been there ever since. So essentially, I was employee 17. When I started, there was no concept of HR. It was a true startup company. There was no strategic plan. There was no whiteboarding to figure out, how we were going to grow or anything like that. We just showed up to work every day and did whatever it took to win. And, I didn't know how to install irrigation systems, but the guy at the local Ace Hardware knew. So I'd go down and say, hey, I've got to fix this pipe. Can you help me? Red Hot Blue Glue. And I was like, no. So, I learned how to mend fences and fix transmissions and take care of dogs and horses. And every day I'd show up to the Welcome Center and get my daily assignment and be off for the day to figure out how to fix whatever was needed fixing or doing. And I can remember getting my first paycheck. And at that point, I showed up in Kanab with $20 in my pocket. And I literally did not have a place to live. And so I legitimately lived in my van and showered at the gym, the local gym. My first paycheck was $183. And I can see now, as I look back, my parents, I understand why they were so upset. Like, what is happening? And so, and from there, back then we were an $800,000 organization. We were pinching every penny. But the gift of our founders and their ingenuity and innovation and their ability to understand that it was the simple acts of, if somebody gives you a donation and they write their name down to be communicated with, you call them and thank them. And to this day, our founders still call donors who give donations of $25 to thank them. And we have, 40,000 visitors that come every year to the sanctuary, and many of them have the same story. I got a phone call from one of your founders thanking me for my $25 donation 15 years ago, and I'm committed for life. And it is, I often say, the organization has become a lifestyle brand. We have members from all over the world that support us, lots of A-list celebrities. It's a movement that's changing the world that these folks created.
That's an amazing story. I love that it was not okay to like work for a nonprofit, but it was okay to drive in a beat up car all the way down into Mexico. It's just,
Oh, she'll be okay.
she'll be okay. Times have changed a little bit on that one. But thank goodness, right? Thank goodness for those serendipitous events. And like the reason they did this and you became so passionate about it was to ultimately, with like the main objective, if I understood it, was to not have these animals be killed in shelters, or like in abusive situations, have a place to go to. Is that correct?
Yeah, so when I started at Best Friends, in this country, 17 million animals were dying every year. Just think about that number for a minute, 17 million. How many people live in Utah now? 3? I mean, it's an incredible number, and to think about the just, these are our best friends. It's not okay to just say, as a society, I mean, if we can't get that right, how do we expect to fix our other issues? Like, seriously, an animal, an innocent animal that's helpless, that can't speak for itself, if we can't figure that piece out, the other stuff is to me, impossible. And so you fast forward from then to now, and their whole point was, we're going to end the killing of animals in America's shelters. Today, it's 365,000 animals that are dying in America's shelters. That is a huge, I always say it's the greatest origin story in nonprofit right now. You got this group of friends that didn't know what they were doing. They basically started this working ranch in southern Utah to end this national problem, and they're doing it. And the organization is doing it. And you think about from 17 million to 365,000, in their lifetimes, they're going to see societal change. And you think about all the causes out there, cancer and homelessness, and they're noble causes, but many of them don't have a cure or a solution, but we do. And to actually be on the cusp of transforming society in that way, a little company in Utah is so cool. I literally pinch myself every day that I have the honor of doing this kind of work, because it's just so rewarding and satisfying in so many different ways.
Absolutely. And so you mentioned Kanab, which is fairly isolated. And how did it work then of, an animal shelter in Denver, Colorado has 12 dogs and 13 cats. That needs to be paid for them to end up in the sanctuary now, versus how does it work now? Because it needs to scale to save all of those animals. How did you guys come up with that plan?
So, so it's a great story, and I think that like a lot of companies, we were growing. We weren't growing that fast, but our founders and our brand, we started to develop a really unique brand voice, which was super positive. And you had all these other animal welfare, animal rights organizations that were like the gore and the blood and the dead animals in their materials. And we were all about the good news and the kindness and the positivity. And a lot of the people that we started to work with, the mailing houses and stuff, they're like, you're never gonna get any donors because you're not creating that sense of urgency. And we were like, look, that's not who we are. We don't want to do that. And they were like, good luck. And our returns were through the roof. And people would call us and say, I don't open the other group's mail because I don't want to see that. I want to read stories of success and positivity. And so we started to build this brand, and then Katrina hit, and the whole country was all hands on deck, including us. And we deployed a team out to Katrina, and We were the first animal welfare group to arrive, and our team stayed there for 9 months. And we helped rescue and rehome or reunite 6,000 animals. And we ended up on CNN and NBC, and it just propelled us into a different stratosphere. And we struggled because we grew so fast. And so then we were trying to be all things to all people. And we went through 3 or 4 years of just trying to figure out who we were again. And we really sat down and said, let's go back to the basics. Why are we here in the first place? We are here because we want to end the killing in animal shelters, not because we want to run around the country doing emergency response or disaster response or international work. And so we got super clear on achieving no kill in this country. And we started cutting other programs that didn't ladder up to that. And the next thing we did, and at that point, there was one known no-kill shelter in the entire country, and it was San Francisco. And it felt like a daunting task to say, you've got one shelter. Nearly every community in this country has an animal shelter. How are we going to do this? And so we started to basically build a playbook that anybody could use, and started to support that programming with our own staff who were experts in running shelters. And we have multiple programs today where we actually, what we call embed staff into a shelter and teach them how to transform from the inside out. It's a systems approach, and it's very effective. And we see, for example, we had a shelter in Texas, in the Rio Grande Valley. They were taking in 30,000 animals a year. And we sent 2 of our staff down there for a year. They were taking 30,000 animals, and 22,000 were losing their lives. And it was just this, animals coming in, animals not going out. 2 staff taught the team there how to save lives, how to go from killing lives to saving lives. And within 1 year, they went from 22,000 animals dying to, of the 30,000 they were taking in, 90% were making it out alive in 1 year. And they've maintained that level. And we have hundreds of stories like that all over the country. And once you see it's possible, who wants in their job description to be, hey, I'm going to kill animals today? Because people do that. And so, really turning this around and saying, how can we best save lives? And the numbers are there. We know that every year 17 million Americans are going to acquire a pet. If there are 17 million Americans out there looking for a dog or cat, and we only have 365,000 to save, it is such a solvable issue. So that's the how. Like at Denver, Colorado, we would go in and help them, or we'd point them to the right resource for the level of need that they have as a shelter.
All right. I love it. I did not know that was how the model worked, and it makes a lot more sense. But if I say like Bentonville and Los Angeles and New York, you guys have locations there, correct?
Yeah, so we, in about 2010, we decided to expand our footprint all over the country. And for different reasons in each community. Los Angeles, Salt Lake City, we've had a presence in for a very, very long time. We have a place in Sugar House across from the soup kitchen. Everyone knows where the soup kitchen is. So you can stop by there and find your new best friend. Salt Lake was kind of our first effort, and one of our first directors is in the audience, Arlen Bradshaw. And then we decided, we'd been in Los Angeles for a very long time as well, and two of our founders really opened up that market. And they did the same thing. You know, they started there by sitting in front of grocery stores and asking for donations. And lo and behold, they started running into all these A-list celebrities. And to the point where these folks were inviting them to their homes for dinner. And, you know, because they loved animals. And so they built this awareness of, I'm gonna date myself, but, you know, Brad Pitt and Jennifer Aniston and Rene Russo and just we had a whole list of A-list celebrities, and we still do. But it was because of those tabling efforts in the early days. Well, Los Angeles, as you know, is a huge city. It's 400 square miles. 30% of the population is below the poverty line. They have 7 municipal shelters. And we were like, look, this community has given us so much. And it is in such bad shape that we know if we can achieve no-kill in Los Angeles, all excuses are off the table in this country. And so we decided to double down and make an announcement that we were going to take LA no-kill. And back then, 57,000 animals were entering those 7 shelters. And we are very, very data-driven. Data drives everything that we do. And we've become sort of data wonks, and that's a really important piece for us. We started looking at their data, and we realized that of the 57,000 animals, about 23,000 were losing their lives. And so we looked at what are those 23,000? Where are they coming from? And it turns out 7,000 were kittens, little baby kittens. And the reason why is kittens are super vulnerable when they're newborn. And most shelters don't have the resources to take care of them. So they're the first to be euthanized. And so we were like, what if we could get them out of the shelter early enough where they didn't catch any disease, and then we could bottle feed them and, you know, have volunteers sign up to bottle feed them. And from there launched the kitten nursery concept. And kitten nurseries now are a staple in life-saving all over the country. And it's those innovative ideas of really just looking at the data and saying, okay, you know, we're going to solve this issue. And so that immediately took a big swipe out of the kill rate in Los Angeles. We ended up signing a contract with the city of Los Angeles to take over one of their shelters in Mission Hills for $1 a year. And they'd built this brand new, beautiful shelter. This is so government. And then they couldn't afford to staff it. And they were gonna like just mothball the place. And so they put out a RFI, and we responded. And it's two city blocks, so it's enormous. And we ended up being awarded the contract, and we've been there. We just vacated the building, but we were there for almost a decade. And we saved thousands and thousands of lives and got Los Angeles to no-kill in 2018. And it's one of those stories where if anyone else in the country says, well, we can't do it because our poverty's too high, or we can't do it because there are too many people, or we can't do it because you can check almost every box about LA, and never mind the drama in LA, which is high. And the doing business there is hard. Getting around is challenging. And so it's one of those things, again, that just really taking a problem that feels impossible and thinking about, look, if we can put a man on the moon, we can figure out how to stop killing kittens in LA. So let's do it. So we opened LA, We opened our New York center in Soho. We have a center in Houston, a small facility in Houston. We have a small facility in Atlanta. And we just barely opened a brand new facility in partnership with the Walton family that is really representative of the shelter of the future. And that's a really cool story, the Walton family.
Go ahead.
So one of the children of Sam Walton, his grandson and wife were in Bentonville, and that's where Walmart's headquarters are. They found a cat. This is how all these stories start. Somebody finds a cat. And she could not find resources to take care of this cat. And so they got together with the foundation and they said, go find someone. We want to learn all we can about animal welfare. It turns out they sort of issued this, like, hey, will you come and do a community assessment, RFP, out into the wider animal welfare world? And we were the only ones that responded. And we came down, we visited, and at the same time, we were doing a lot of work in Houston. And I had been working with the director of Harris County, and Harris County is a very big county. It's the 4th largest city in America, Houston. And it was another one of these 30,000 animals coming in, 26,000 dying. I met with the director, and he was in this facility that had been built in like 1968, and it was a dump. And it was cinder block and cages, you know. If you haven't been in a shelter, you know the visual. And he's like, but look, we're building a new shelter right here. And they'd poured the pad. And I said to him, hey, can I see your plans? You know, it would be interesting to see what your design is. And it turns out the design was exactly the same as the shelter he was in, only bigger. Rows and rows of cages, cinder block, no customer service. The lighting was terrible. And I was like, who designed this for you? It was the same firm that designed the prison system, which is an interesting analogy, right? And so as our Bentonville relationship began to develop, this idea started to percolate. This area of our world needs disruption. We need to disrupt the way we think about animal shelters. They should be a pet resource center. It should be a place like this where people come in. It's, you know, meant for customers. It's meant for somebody who is going to purchase something, a retail outlet. Like, that's how you all think. You want to go into an environment where you smile. You don't want to go into an environment where you're looking through your fingers. And so the idea of Bentonville is thinking about, you've got these municipalities all over the country who are building new shelters through bonds. Houston was a $24,000 municipal bond. And we just spent $19.2 million on this center in Bentonville, and you think, well, all cities should be doing that Bentonville model because you're going to save a lot more lives and you're going to help people in the community keep pets in their homes. And so we have this tremendous partnership with the Walton family, with Walmart. It's a deep engagement. Walmart sends their employees over there all the time, and a lot of their other vendors are involved with us. And it is a terrific example of, you know, people want to help animals. 80% of Americans have a pet, and rich, poor, whatever. And the best part about this is that people also want to innovate dying industries that have been around for 150 years that have done the same thing year over year without thinking about how can we do this better? How can we disrupt this? And that's what I love so much about Best Friends.
Yeah, for sure. Like, you're painting a beautiful story here. It's the classic startup story. I love that you've gone from sleeping in your van, $183 paycheck, showering in the gym, to like really cool looking dashboards, and like clearly you guys have like business intelligence, and the numbers are there and the proof is there on your website, right? Like, it is a really robust looking website. All of this takes grit and determination and a bit of craziness, but unfortunately it takes money as well. A quick glance at your website, obviously hearing the story, you guys are really squared away in that. You do need to monetize it and get these donations in, and it's amazing that the founders still call and say thank you. You get a lot by being polite in this world, but you've got all sorts of ways that people can get involved. How do you guys kind of think through strategically, where's the money, big, small, medium, how can we activate that, and how does it tie into like the broader overall like PR initiative of what you guys do from a positive angle?
You know, it's nonprofit business and for-profit business have a lot of similarities, but the biggest difference is the fundraising, because it's not a transactional thing, and you know, it really is. You know, it's a dynamic ability to connect with people, to believe in your mission. We often internally call them our investors. They want to see a return on their donation. And so we think about stuff that way. And we think about when we were building this positive brand. And by the way, we've won the Harris Brand of the Year award like 7 years out of 9. For animal welfare nonprofit, which is a really cool honor. And I think the founders had the vision to create something that people wanted to be a part of and that people wanted to help. And so we started doing direct mail because that's what you do and did. And at that time, I had switched roles, and I think I have about 30 business cards that have different titles in the organization since I've been there. And I had just been put over our marketing and communications and development. And I recognized that so that team often hears me talk about, I believe every company in this world, whether you're nonprofit or for-profit, is going to be a tech company. And we better double down on technology. And we have quite a robust technology area. And our fundraising is no different. And essentially, we decided at that point we really need to up our game. And so we started to really go big on bringing in experts that knew what they were doing. And so we brought in somebody who was on her way to Facebook. We brought in somebody that worked for Honda. You know, so our tech team is really, really top notch. And they really helped us redesign our digital fundraising. And so our digital fundraising, when I interviewed our chief digital officer, I said, give me your elevator, like, tell me what you can do for us. She said, in 2 years, I can take your digital fundraising from 2 million to 10 million. And I was like, that's BS. And I said, okay, tell me what your plan is. And she walked through it. And sure enough, 2 years later, our digital fundraising had gone from $2 million to 10 million. And so the ways to give for us, we have multiple revenue streams. Digital fundraising is one, direct mail is another. Our planned giving, so a lot of our members are interested in leaving us in their estate. And so that's a really big area for us. Stock options are a big area. During COVID, we decided to start accepting digital currency or Bitcoin and Dogecoin. And so we get a lot of donations that way. There are many different ways to give. They are all on our website at bestfriends.org. And a lot of people want to leave their legacy to the animals. So there's a lot of different ways that we receive donations. People donate property to us, houses, raw land, vehicles, and we've gotten some strange things. But it's all out of generosity. So there's a lot of different ways to fuel our mission.
Yeah, that's amazing. With that answer, there's probably a lot of envious nonprofits out there thinking, my goodness, they've got it dialed in. By the way, I have some cheat notes here, $130 million now and 850 employees, right?
So this year we're going to be a $160 million organization, and we have 850 employees all over the country. About 400 are located in Kanab, Utah. And we made the decision back in 2010 to go remote. And so the other 450 employees are either at one of our life-saving centers, or we have an employee in every single state, but 2.
That's amazing. So you'd probably be the biggest employer in the county, right?
So we are the biggest employer in Kane County, Utah. And I love that. I think it's look, we have had our struggles being in rural Utah. We've had our struggles, recruiting talent. But at the end of the day, what we've seen is that I love that we support rural Utah that way. And I am such a fan. I love that I can leave my keys in my truck and I don't worry. I love that I don't have to lock my doors at night. I love that I still see kids riding bikes in the neighborhood. It is a really cool town, and I think that more companies should really consider the quality of life of living in a rural town and thinking about their company being based there. There's a lot of benefit to it. It is challenging in a way, but it's definitely doable.
Oh yeah, it sounds pretty darn nice. We're going to open it up for questions from the audience in 1 second here, so if we could get ready. Get your courage up and get ready to ask some questions here to Julie. How often do you have to work with lawmakers on national, state, and municipal levels, and what is that like?
So because we deal with mostly municipal shelters, we do have private humane societies that we work with too. The lawmakers make the rules. And this took us a long time to figure out. Like we were slow to the game on this. And the minute that we figured it out, it's been transformative. We have a really incredible team. One of them is here in the audience again, Arlen, who is a Salt Lake County commissioner or a council member who works for us. And it makes all the difference. They determine whether or not, laws are passed about cat ordinances, for example. And so these are life and death decisions. So it is a critical component. And so you better believe that we have lobbyists in communities where we need them the most.
Gotcha. All right, let's open it up for questions. For Julie, raise your hand right there.
Hi, is this on? Can you hear me? I'm trying to get my head around exactly how you do this. So I'm thinking of that South Texas, Rio Grande location that I think you mentioned. And you said they were taking in 30,000 animals a year and putting down 22,000 of them, I think you said, and that dropped to 3,000. So where did those other 19,000 animals go? Are they placed? Are they sort of their permanent residents? How does that work?
So that's a great question. I'm glad you circled back to that because that's just one model for us, that embed program. We have different models as well, but those animals go into adoptive homes, or in that case, in the Rio Grande Valley, they would be transferred out. So there's a robust transport program to other parts of the country where they're actually running out of adoptable animals. So in the Northeast, for example, there's a huge demand for those types of animals. So that's a big program. It's not, it's not sustainable. In other words, we want to fix the problem where it's at, but that takes more time because a big component of that is spay-neuter. We've got to fix the animals in that community so they don't continue to reproduce. So that's where the 30,000 animals go. But adoptions and adopting those pets is a huge part of it. And most of these shelters haven't been engaging their local community. That's a big part of the reason why so many are dying. Like, a lot of people don't even know this is a problem. And so, that's one way that we relate to it. Another really cool program that we have where we're scaling this is we have our Shelter Collaborative program, where we take a no-kill shelter that's highly functioning, and we put them up, we pair them with another shelter that needs the help. And we give them grants to do this. So the no-kill shelter will take the kill shelter no-kill. And that's been extraordinarily successful as well. We have about 100 partners now in that program, which is really awesome.
Hello, it was really nice to come listen to you today. I've followed your organization for years. The first time I ever came to Utah was to come specifically to Best Friends and volunteer for a week, just to volunteer. And one of the things you didn't speak about was the role that volunteerism plays in the success of your organization. One of the things I was always impressed with was the first time I came to the sanctuary, there were people who had traveled internationally just to come to Utah, just to come to Best Friends, just to volunteer. And I always thought that's why Best Friends was so successful, because you knew how to utilize that volunteer resource. And to this day, I almost went to work for you guys a year ago, but another big tech company snatched me up in Lehigh. But I still volunteer. Like, I have one of your foster kittens at home right now. But, if you could speak to just the opportunity to volunteer and the role that played in your organization, because I think you guys do an excellent job, not even telling people or pushing it, but people want to volunteer for you guys.
It's such a great point and so cool, and thank you so much for coming out and volunteering. And we do get a lot of people that come to the sanctuary and bring their kids and stay for a week or 2 weeks. But there are also other opportunities that we have all over the country. Everything from, right now it's kitten season. So kittens' reproductive cycle is cyclical because of the weather. And so right now we are like bursting at the seams with kittens. And we need volunteers to bottle feed these kittens every 3 hours. And so we've got a whole crew of volunteers in Salt Lake and in every life-saving center that bottle feed. We have volunteers that foster. We have volunteers that do our social media. We have volunteers that collect data for us from these shelters. We have volunteers that help with our tech team. Like, you name it, we have volunteers that help our maintenance team. They do everything, our transport. It is an army of staff. And I just went through these stats, and I can't remember them, but it is a huge, it nearly quadruples our workforce. And so it's a really effective way for us to achieve our mission, and people want to help. So thank you for raising that.
It's a win-win. Right over here.
So a couple of questions. I was just wondering, you had mentioned that you somehow, you often embed people in shelters, to show where they can improve. And I was just wondering what that looks like. And when you're out there, in these shelters, what have been the major deficiencies? Has it been more of a matter of, outreach? Is it, better use of social media? Is it disabusing the people of the notion that animals in shelters are somehow damaged? So I guess that's one question. And then the other is kind of in the role I'm in now, I work with a lot of philanthropists, and clearly here a lot of people, the dollars go to the church first, but then after that, a lot of it's kind of health or, mitigating, economic inequality, early childhood education. Do you think there's some kind of avenue forward where you can kind of attract more philanthropic dollars by helping people think of, animal welfare more differently, about how it impacts not just the individual animal, but how it better serves the community interest as a whole?
Really, really interesting questions. So we encounter, whenever we go to a shelter, a lot of the problems are the same, and some of them are totally unique to that community. And you think about, this is a part of our society that's been tucked in the corner of your community. Usually the city shelter is somewhere near the dump. And again, you think about designed by the prison, the same architect that designed the prison. The value that we've placed on these pets is so bizarre to me when 80% of Americans have animals. And so basically, you have this system that's been operating for 150 years without anybody questioning, why are we doing this, until the founders of Best Friends built the sanctuary and started asking that question. And so a lot of this initially started out as resistance to, like, this is the way we've always been doing it. There's no way to save this many lives. And so some of it is that initially, like when you've spent your whole career doing something one way and somebody comes into your place from Utah to say, hey, there's a better way to do this, that's a hard sell. And so we've had to be very disarming about that. And I think that, and listen, because they're going to tell you exactly what they need eventually. And so most of the issues are around public awareness in the community. Like, most communities don't know how many animals are dying in their shelter. So that's number one. So it is a PR issue, it's a social media issue, it's getting the word out, it's marketing the animals, and it's training the staff on things like vaccination upon intake to control disease. Because a lot of these shelters have disease outbreaks, and if they just vaccinate on intake, they'd save thousands of lives. So but a big part of it is the systems are not as efficient as they could be. So the way that they process their animals, for example, their record keeping, it's those kind of things that they need help with, and nuts and bolts running a business, essentially. So there's a lot to it, but it takes, each shelter is slightly different, and it takes an assessment to really determine what's needed. In terms of giving to animal welfare, when you look at where money goes in charitable terms, animal welfare is lumped in with the environment, and it's less than 3% of Americans' total giving, which is really crazy. And in terms of elevating that, in my opinion, it starts with, hey, we need to do the very core thing, which is we need to end the killing of shelter pets by 2025. Let's start there, because every time we do that, we are losing a piece of our soul. To me, it's a basic societal deal. Like, we're the ones that put these animals in this place in the first place. We're the ones that domesticated these animals. And now that what we're paying them back with is killing them, like, it doesn't make any sense. It's a damaging thing to ourself as human beings.
Julie, thanks for coming down. I know it's a drive for you. I'm Sarah Burns. I'm the founder of My Funny Valentine. I'm network partners with you guys, as are maybe some others here. I have kind of a unorthodox question for you, having nothing to do with strategy, but perhaps more philosophy. You know, I note in our industrialized, technological, monetary-based world, we've really been separated in our relationship from earth and animal. And yet, like you said, 80% of families in the United States have animals. People will go out of their way for animals in a way that they will not go out of their way for other human beings, very often, right? And philosophically, I wonder if you have an opinion on what it is we're seeking to make it back to within ourselves, within our own hearts, through that of our relationship with animals.
That is a really awesome question and a deep one. And I think, for just so you know, a network, we have a network partners is what we call them, of 4,200 animal welfare organizations across the country that are a part of our network. And they are awesome. They do a variety of different things. We provide them with resources. But it's an incredible way for us to sort of scale life-saving across the country. In terms of that, I think that, you know, I'll just give you my personal point of view, is that when I get home from work or home from a trip like this one, and I see my animals, they don't care if I smell. Well, actually, they might be happy about that. They don't care if I'm, you know, they don't care what I look like. They don't care what my hair looks like. They don't judge me. They're happy to see me, and they just give. They just keep giving. And I think that inherently for me, this is about, you know, saving these lives is kind of about saving yourself. And I think that's what it boils down to. That, you know, these are individual souls that are critical to the connection of the whole planet. And you think about, we've done such a great job as a society of compartmentalizing. Oh, well, they're just animals. But the more we learn as humans, and the more elevated that we become, the more we recognize how connected everything really is. And that, to me, is the beauty of sort of redeeming ourselves and solving this issue, is that we created it in the first place. And so the fact that we have an opportunity right now to solve it is pretty freaking cool.
Well said. Yeah, at the Humane Society, there's a billboard with animals on it on I-15, right? And when I'm with my kids, it's always, I gotta look at that pretty mountain over there to the left, right? Because if they see the billboard, they'll say, let's go get those bunnies. And I'll inevitably say, let's go, right? And I would do it 50 out of 50 times, right? And I have to like say, look away. Otherwise, like it's like I'm drawn in there. And you can't have goats and bunnies and all of that in Holiday, Utah. Otherwise, I'd be there every day. So I completely agree with what you've said, and thank you so much for sharing just a really beautiful story. Obviously, a lot of entrepreneurship principles that apply across all industries, but I hope through our distribution, you can get people to nurse the kitties and to donate and to really like enrich their lives through animals, right? If you're having a bad day, just go be around an animal, and 9 times out of 10, it gets a lot better. Thank you, Julie.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here.